Never before has the screen reached such heights of excitement.
In 1952, a double feature cost 25 cents, and UFOs were science fiction. And so it wasn't surprising that very few people took the threat seriously when flying saucers showed up in the nation's capital. It was the end of the trail for an unprecedented wave of UFO sightings, in which more than 1,500 people had reported seeing the strange craft.
1952 was a major turning point in the history of UFOs for the main reason that this was the year that so many UFOs were seen by military interceptor pilots and tracked on radar.
Richard Hall believes that the Flap of 52 was among the most significant events in UFO history.
When these sightings happened, we were in the midst of the Cold War, which involved a fear that the Soviet Union was going to send bombers over and there would be an atomic war. And this was the period when we had bomb shelters and air raid drills, and kids at school had to go hide under their desks. And so the immediate reaction was, well, this must be a Soviet Union enterprise. It must be a breakthrough in technology.
The United States Air Force launched a top-secret investigation as part of the year-old Project Blue Book.
Air Technology Center in Dayton, Ohio was put on a high-priority project to check this out, and they very quickly learned that this was not anything the Soviet Union had produced. And this led a lot of people immediately to say, well, if it's not from the Soviet Union, it must be from outer space, because there was no other explanation for it.
The Foreign Technology Division at Wright Field, now Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, was swamped with calls from alarmed eyewitnesses. Veteran newspaper reporter Al Chop was hired by the Air Force to manage the flow of information.
The policy at that time was to answer to the best of our ability any queries on particular UFO sightings, and often we could explain what the people saw, often we could not.
Chop estimates that at least 25% of the UFOs investigated by the Air Force were verifiable, but unidentifiable, including this Montana sighting and the sighting in Utah. In each case, eyewitnesses described multiple bluish-white objects flying in formation at speeds beyond the reach of 1952 technology. The government was interested, but not alarmed by these sightings until two Midsummer's Night Saturdays, when they showed up in Washington, D.C.
We have UFO sightings that take place at the Washington National Airport on 2 consecutive Saturday nights. Objects are seen on radar. They're seen visually, not only at Washington National Airport, but Andrews Air Force Base. Everybody who was there saw something.
Kevin Randle has one of the largest collections of data, documents, and photographs about the Washington incident.
What is interesting is that we have radars in separate locations also seeing the objects. We have airline pilots seeing them as well. Air Force interceptors are scrambled. They see the objects as well. So we have a wide variety of people seeing these bright bluish-white lights.
In 1952, National Airport was Washington's only airport, centrally located and within a few miles of 3 important intelligence centers: the Pentagon, the White House, and the Capitol. Al Chop was in the airport radar room the night the UFOs first appeared.
We let the press in, and they were observing the scope, along with the radar operators. We had about 4 or 5 radar operators there.
The Air Force ordered an immediate scramble at nearby Bolin Air Force Base. But the interceptor jets weren't there. They were in Delaware.
The Air Defense Squadron that normally guards the Capitol was assigned to Newcastle, Delaware, because they were repairing the runways at Bolin Air Force Base, which seemed unusual for UFOs to visit the Capitol when the jets aren't there.
It took over an hour for 2 F-94s to reach the Capitol.
Well, we could see the flight coming in. All of our unknowns disappeared completely from the scope. It was kind of scary, so we let them go back to base. It seemed like the very second that the interceptors left the range of our scope, our UFOs came back.
The fighters were recalled and began searching the skies over Washington. One pilot did make visual contact with the UFOs, and this time, the objects did not disappear.
He flew into this cluster of lights, and then he said, "I see them, they're all around me." And he described them as brilliant blue-white lights. And we just looked at each other, couldn't figure out what was going on up there.
The objects hovered in the sky until dawn, then disappeared. There were banner headlines in newspapers across the country. recounting the spectacular flyover and speculating about its origin. On July 29, 1952, Major General John A. Samford, Air Force Chief of Intelligence, held this press conference to explain the government's position.
I am here to discuss the so-called flying saucers. We have, as of date, come to only one firm conclusion.
It was the most heavily attended news conference since World War II. That's how big it was. And they were under pressure to explain, what is this thing that's flying all over the country that we can't identify and have no control over? The official conclusion the Air Force came to was that temperature inversions had caused these sightings. Temperature inversions are when a cool layer of air gets trapped over a warm layer and forms a sort of atmospheric lens, and signals are refracted, and you see things flying around where there really is nothing.
According to Hall, temperature inversions give only very weak radar returns and are incapable of the kind of acrobatic performance clearly observed on radar at National Airport.
And the Air Force came up with the rather lame explanation that there were temperature inversions. This, for some reason, satisfied people. It's hard to imagine why, but it did. It threw people off the track, and newsmen, like everybody else, I guess, it was too mind-boggling for them to believe it was real.
Red leader.
But the incident is indelibly set in the minds of those who experienced it firsthand.
These were good, solid returns. The Air Force radar expert who was present that night stated that they were good, solid returns, and he thought they were picking up metallic objects.
These solid returns from metal objects have never been identified, friend or foe, earthly or extraterrestrial. From Utah in 1952 to the so-called attack on Washington to Mexico City in 1992, these objects remain a tantalizing mystery, begging to be solved. But so far, no government has been willing to claim the obsolete 40-year-old technology as its own, or to provide another explanation, or even to pledge the funds necessary to conduct a comprehensive investigation. Our leaders do not see UFOs as a potential threat, and in that way, little has changed since 1952. By assuming the Washington flap of 52 was created by unusual weather conditions, some ufologists believe the U.S. government missed a golden opportunity to make significant contact with extraterrestrial visitors. They wonder, will we be ready the next time other worldly forces choose to make their presence known?